theory of relativity, okay? There's a lot to it, but I'm just going to focus on one particular part of it for the purposes of our discussion, and then I'll kind of go into frequencies. Basically, what was happening was this guy by the name of Edwin Hubble. Most of us know his name from the Hubble telescope, big giant telescope that's floating around out there in space.
Right.
Edwin Hubble was an astronomer. And what Hubble discovered, to his astonishment, was that he believed that he actually discovered the fact that the planets and galaxies that he was observing through his telescopes were moving away from the point of observation. He believed that space, in effect, was somehow expanding outward. And the reason why he believed that was because he noticed that objects that seemed to be closer to him in distance, through his mathematical calculations, had a bluish light to them whenever he looked at the stars, but the ones further away tended to have a reddish-orange tint to them when he looked at them. And what he called this was redshift. This is basically, and a lot of people who've studied creation have probably seen that term before. But redshift is kind of like it's like a Doppler effect for visual things, and if most people are familiar with the Doppler effect is basically like if you're standing on train tracks, for example, and you see a train approaching, you hear the whistle in the background. As the train is further away and approaching, the whistle seems like it's low in pitch, but as it gets closer, it tends to get higher in pitch, and as it travels past you and moves down the tracks away from you, it sounds like as the whistle continues to blow, it's getting lower and lower in pitch again. Or like if you've seen these guys who drive past you when you're driving around in the city or whatever with these radios that you can hear everything outside of the car and all that sort of thing. As if you're standing there on the street corner and listening, the sound of the song sounds lower in pitch, and it sounds like it's moving slower. As it gets towards you, it actually starts to pick up and goes higher in pitch, but then as it moves away, it sounds lower again. The reason why that's happening is because of the Doppler effect. The sound waves are more compressed as they get closer to you, and they're stretched out as they're further away. What Hubble believed was that the same effect was happening with the actual redshift, going from blue-violet to reddish-orange tint whenever he was looking at the stars. He got with Einstein on this thing, and he said, hey, these stars that I'm observing that are further away, seemingly, they seem to be moving further out. They're getting redder and redder and redder. I believe they're moving away from us. And so Einstein came up with this idea of general theory of relativity, whereby large objects can bend space-time or in this sort of thing. But he also came up with this thing that set the stage for the Big Bang. Now, most people have heard about that one. And that's whereby they believe that all things, taking the logic that Hubble and Einstein used, if space is expanding, then if you reverse that, then that means space came from a central point. So where did that point come from? Well, these guys basically cooked it up, not necessarily Hubble and Einstein, but they set the stage for this theory to come by, whereby people believe that there was nothing out there. Remember, there's no ether now, given the fact that they're not acknowledging Sognac's findings. There's no ether, there's nothing that's out there, but nothing somehow doubled on top of nothing, and then it formed some kind of little dense ball, this mass, and this mass exploded outward all of a sudden because of the pressures in it. And as this matter was exploding outward, it was flying out into space, and it slowly began to circle around and clump together and form planets and galaxies over millions of years. Okay, that's the Big Bang in a nutshell. Well, the thing about it is the Big Bang is absolutely positively wrong for several reasons. First of all, in the Evolution Handbook, Vance Farrell gives a lot of this, but basically nothing by definition can't double up on top of nothing. Okay, you got nothing is nothing. That's what nothing is. So nothing can't double up on top of itself. Also, if there was a dense ball and it exploded outward, if there's nothing out there in space, if there's no substance now, it's just a vacuum in and of itself, then most people know from their basic elementary physics classes that if anything's moving in a straight line by Newtonian physics, then there has to be some type of friction or interference with it to cause it to move in another direction. So if a mass ball exploded in a vacuum, an endless vacuum, and it was exploding outward into space, then there would have to be some type of substance, first of all, to cause these particles to slow down and then start rotating around each other and clumping together. But if these guys are claiming that there was just a vacuum out there, there's nothing to slow anything down. So if this ball exploded, then all of the matter in it should still be traveling, hurling out at the speed of light, going to outer space, and there should be no planets, no galaxies, no nothing. if they're accurate.
Yeah.
So obviously they can't be accurate. So what really happened? Well, Sagnaic's idea can be applied to Hubble's observations. It's not so much that Hubble was watching space expanding. It's that by the redshift was the result in some way of the ether luminiferous. The ether luminiferous, according to, and this is in Joseph Farrell's book, in the Giza Death Star trilogy, in one of his books, but the ether luminiferous can actually cause a shifting in the color when you're looking at these stars at a distance. It's kind of like if if you're in the water in the swimming pool and you don't have your goggles on, and something that's closer to you is much clearer than something something way off. Somebody's kind of kicking around in the distance. You can barely see that thing unless you have those goggles on, right? Well, it's the same idea. Since the ether is the medium that space is in, it's like it's almost like the water in the swimming pool. Then the thing that's closer to you is clearer than the thing that's further away. So Sagnaic's discovery of the ether can not only explain the fact that there's an ether at the smaller scale, but it can also explain what Hubble actually discovered. It was a misunderstanding of what he discovered, and of course that undoes the Big Bang.
Wow.
Yeah, so what does all this mean? It means that an almighty God created everything. You didn't evolve. The universe did not evolve. This thing did not just occur from Big Bang. What actually happened was God Almighty set this thing up. And when you start looking into quantum physics and this sort of thing, what you'll find out is that they're starting to realize, hey, something did have to happen whereby an intelligent observer did actually have to create all things. We can't explain this any other way. For example, what a lot of quantum physicists are now starting to realize, and quantum mechanics engineers and what have you are starting to realize, is that actually, when it's all said and done, something had to be there. The Big Bang didn't just come from nothing.
Right.
So what was there? Well, if you have an ether that's out there, that can actually function as technically as your nothing. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is this. If you take, for example, this is just an illustration to show you. Let's say you have a massive sea of purple-colored balls, okay? All these balls are spinning in motion. It's a gigantic, almost an ocean of balls, okay? And these balls are all spinning around and around and around and around as fast as they can. And all these balls are spinning as fast as possible as they possibly can, and they're all going in the same direction at the same time, okay? Well, if you're an observer kind of looking at the balls from a distance, kind of outside of this ocean of balls, you'll actually see all these things moving all at the same time in the same way. Like, oh, look at this giant pool of spinning purple balls, right? Yeah. But if you're standing on one of those balls and you're moving at the same speed and time as the balls are, then to you it looks like nothing's there.
Wow.
Okay? So what's happening is, from one perspective, there's something there, but from another perspective, it's not. So what could happen is, if somebody simply thumped one of those balls, and let's say when it thumped, it went from purple, but when it starts spinning the opposite direction, it spins to green. Well, all the other balls are spinning as purple, but this one ball is spinning as green, opposite to it. Now to the person sitting there on top of the balls who saw nothing at first, to them they actually see something there, right? There's this one green ball that's there. Now suddenly you have something that seems to have come out of nothing. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
But the thing is, there was something there. It was all the purple balls there. You understand?
Yes.
So from one perspective, it looks like nothing was there, but from another perspective, it was always something there. And that's the perspective that we have to understand that God had. There is a dimension of God whereby he can actually observe things even outside of his own spirit. But there's another dimension whereby he can actually be observing things within that spirit, and by virtue of that, in a sense, you can say, well, God created something out of nothing, but in another sense, you can actually say that God created something out of himself.
Yes.
And that is the ether, that's the spirit of God, whereby all things that are physical, all things that are visible, came out of that which is invisible. No Christian should be shocked by what I'm saying. I'm basically taking a paraphrase from Hebrews chapter 11, right? All things that are visible came from all things that are invisible. By faith is what it says in there. That's how God made all things. And that takes us into the frequencies and into how God did it.
Now, I got a question.
Okay.
It says somewhere, and I think it's in the book of Isaiah, that at some point